In this world, we are often beset by forces that seek to sway us, to shape our thoughts, and to manipulate our will. Yet, the true strength of a Stoic lies not in how easily they can be influenced, but in how they maintain their inner fortress amidst the storm. We, as Stoics, do not look to the world to deign our peace, nor do we bend our minds to the whims of others. Instead, we master our own thoughts, our own emotions, and our own responses. Today we explore the principles that allow us to avoid the snares of manipulation, to remain unshaken in the face of external pressures, and to rise above the machinations of those who gradations. Let us turn our attention inward, for it is in mastering the self that we fortify our minds against the will of others. Through the wisdom of Stoicism, we can embrace our true power and live unyielding to the forces that seek to bend us. 1. Understanding the power of perception. The first step in avoiding manipulation lies in understanding the power of perception. It is not the events themselves that disturb us, but how we perceive them. This truth, echoed by Epictetus, remains a cornerstone of Stoic wisdom. The world around us is filled with distractions, deceptions, and attempts to control our thoughts, yet none of these can touch us unless we allow them to. The power of perception lies in the mind of the individual. It is here that manipulation finds fertile ground or is swiftly extinguished. When we allow external influences to shape our perception, we relinquish control over our inner peace. Manipulators thrive in the space between perception and reality, using our desires, fears, and insecurities as tools to distort our understanding of truth. They present a false narrative, one that plays on our weaknesses and makes us question our own judgment. But as Stoics, we must remain steadfast in our perception, for only by mastering our inner world can we avoid the grasp of manipulation. Consider this: when someone tries to manipulate you, what they are truly doing is attempting to alter your perception of reality. They want to change the way you view a situation, a person, or even yourself. In that moment, you must recognize that the manipulation is not in the event itself, but in the way it is framed and presented to you. The manipulator relies on your emotional reactions, your insecurities, and your fears, knowing that if they can control how you see the world, they can control your actions. However, the Stoic does not succumb to such tactics. The Stoic understands that perception is an internal matter, shaped not by the events themselves, but by the judgment we place upon them. When a manipulative individual seeks to steer your thoughts, remind yourself that the external world cannot force you into a position you do not wish to occupy. You are the one who grants power to what you perceive, and it is within your control to withdraw that power from anything that seeks to undermine your peace. To develop this strength, you must cultivate awareness. Each moment, each interaction is an opportunity to practice discernment. When faced with someone who tries to manipulate you, step back and observe your own thoughts. Ask yourself, what is truly happening here? What are the facts, and what is being suggested? Is there an agenda at play? Is your perception of the situation being influenced by fear, desire, or pride? Once you recognize that your initial reaction is based on perception and not on reality, you can begin to challenge the manipulation before it takes root. The art of perceiving clearly requires practice. It is not enough to simply acknowledge that manipulation exists. You must train your mind to see through it. Just as a sculptor refines their craft with every stroke, so too must you refine your ability to discern truth from falsehood. The Stoic exercises the mind, sharpening it with philosophy, with reflection, and with self-awareness. This is the practice of controlling perception, not allowing the noise of the world to distort your view, but keeping your vision clear, focused on what is true and just. Consider the words of Marcus Aurelius, who, in his Meditations, reminds us to look beyond the surface of things. When faced with challenges, he counsels us to look at the true nature of the situation, not to be swayed by appearances or external judgments. When a manipulator presents you with their version of the truth, it is your duty to peel back the layers of falsehood and see things as they truly are. The Stoic does not accept the world as it is given to them. They question, they reflect, and they examine the reality beneath the surface. In this way, perception becomes a tool of strength, a shield against those who would seek to control your mind. When you understand the power of perception, you begin to realize that nothing can manipulate you unless you permit it. It is not enough to avoid the manipulations of others. You must fortify your mind, ensuring that no matter how persuasive or cunning the external forces may be, you will remain unmoved. By embracing this principle, you are not merely protecting yourself from manipulation. You are reclaiming your power. The manipulator, in their attempts to control your perception, assumes that you are weak, that your mind is easily swayed. But a Stoic is unshaken. They understand that their thoughts, their judgments, and their reactions are within their control. No external force can take that away, and in this lies true freedom. Thus, we must commit ourselves to understanding the true nature of perception. We must practice seeing the world clearly, without the distortions of fear or desire, and reject any attempt to manipulate our thoughts. By mastering this principle, we take the first step toward becoming impervious to the influence of others. In the face of manipulation, the Stoic remains calm, clear, and resolute, knowing that their perception is their own, and that no one can alter it without their consent. 2. The Stoic approach to external influences. To navigate the world with clarity, we must first understand the nature of external influences. The Stoic philosophy teaches that there are things beyond our control, external forces, opinions, events, and actions of others which, if we allow them, can easily manipulate our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. However, the Stoic does not surrender their inner peace to the whims of the world. Instead, they learn to distinguish between what they can change and what they must accept, focusing only on those things within their power and releasing attachment to all else. The greatest source of manipulation lies in the power we give to external influences. The world outside us is full of noise, the opinions of others, the expectations of society, the demands of authority figures. These influences seek to shape our values, our desires, and our understanding of what is important. Yet, the Stoic recognizes that the external world is unpredictable and indifferent to our personal concerns. The external environment will not cater to our needs or desires, and it is foolish to think that we can bend the world to our will. Recognizing this truth allows the Stoic to let go of the desire to control everything around them. We do not possess the power to change the actions of others or to dictate the events of the world. However, we do possess the power to shape our response to these forces. This is the essence of Stoic resilience, the ability to remain unaffected by the external, to preserve inner peace even when the world tries to drag us into its chaos. A manipulator, whether intentional or not, thrives on influencing others by appealing to their vulnerabilities, their fears, and their desires. The manipulator plays upon the need for approval, the fear of rejection, and the desire for material gain. They push us toward actions that align with their agenda, manipulating our perception of what is important and what is not. But the Stoic understands that approval and rejection, gain and loss, are matters external to the self. These things are not within our control, and thus they hold no power over us. The Stoic practice is to turn inward and question the external forces that attempt to sway our thoughts and actions. The opinion of others, the praise or blame of society, none of these hold lasting value unless we permit them to. When someone seeks to manipulate you, ask yourself, why do I value their opinion? What power have I given them over me? What is it that they seek to gain from this interaction? By recognizing the external influences for what they are, you begin to see them not as threats, but as opportunities for self-mastery. You have the ability to accept or reject these influences. By recognizing your own strength and resilience, you strip them of their power. One of the most powerful lessons in Stoicism is learning to identify the things you cannot control and letting go of them completely. The Stoic sage does not waste energy in fighting forces that lie outside their control. Instead, they focus on refining their own character, their own judgment, and their own actions. By practicing this, we avoid becoming pawns in the games of manipulation. We are no longer vulnerable to external pressures because we have learned to detach ourselves from the outcomes that others upon us. It is essential, then, to assess the external forces that influence our lives. The Stoic does not ignore these forces or live in denial of their existence. Rather, they acknowledge their presence but recognize their insignificance in relation to their own internal sovereignty. The opinions of others, the events that befall us, and the judgments passed by society are all fleeting. The Stoic focuses not on the power that these forces have over us, but on the power we have over how we respond. For instance, when you are confronted by a manipulative person who seeks to bend your will to their desires, the Stoic approach is to remain centered in your own values. The manipulator will try to make you feel that your sense of worth or security depends on their approval, but the Stoic knows that their worth is intrinsic and not reliant upon external validation. Your integrity, your sense of purpose, and your peace of mind cannot be compromised unless you permit it. The Stoic does not bow to the whims of others, nor do they bend to the demands of external circumstances. They remain steady, anchored in the knowledge that their true power lies in their ability to control their responses, not in controlling the world around them. To practice this, one must regularly reflect on what is truly within our control. The Stoic conducts daily exercises in contemplation, reminding themselves that they are not the master of external events, but are the masters of their thoughts, their judgments, and their actions. The more one trains the mind to return to this central truth, the less vulnerable one becomes to manipulation. By consistently reminding ourselves that we cannot control others, we also free ourselves from the desire to manipulate or be manipulated in return. In relationships, whether personal or professional, the Stoic must remain vigilant. When someone attempts to manipulate us, they are often appealing to our sense of guilt, our desire for approval, or our fear of failure. Recognize that these are not true drivers of action, but merely external pressures trying to impose themselves upon you. The Stoic does not act out of fear or out of the need to please others, but out of a sense of inner conviction and rationality. By focusing on what is right, just, and virtuous, we ensure that our actions are rooted in our own principles, not in the shifting winds of external influence. The Stoic practice is not to fight against the world, but to maintain equanimity within it. When you acknowledge the world as it is, with all its challenges, opinions, and manipulations, you begin to see it with clarity and detachment. You no longer react with emotional turbulence or allow external pressures to distort your judgment. Instead, you respond with wisdom, guided by your own understanding of what is truly important. Thus, the Stoic approach to external influences is one of discernment and detachment. Recognize what is beyond your control and release it. Direct your energy toward the cultivation of inner strength and clarity. In doing so, you arm yourself against the forces of manipulation, remaining anchored in your own power and unaffected by the external noise. You are not a puppet to be controlled, you are the master of your own mind, and that is where your true strength lies. 3. Recognizing what is within our control. At the heart of Stoicism lies a simple yet profound truth: the only things within our control are our own thoughts, actions, and judgments. All else, circumstances, the opinions of others, external events, are beyond our grasp. This understanding is not merely a philosophical concept, but a powerful tool for avoiding manipulation and maintaining our inner peace. The more clearly we grasp this principle, the more resilient we become in the face of external pressures, and the less susceptible we are to being swayed by those who would seek to control us. The Stoic understands that the nature of control is not in what happens to us, but in how we respond. Events are neutral; they are neither good nor bad until we assign meaning to them. When we allow ourselves to become entangled in the belief that we can control what is outside of us, we open ourselves up to frustration, anxiety, and vulnerability to manipulation. To avoid this, we must train ourselves to recognize the limits of our power and focus exclusively on what we can govern, our own responses. A manipulator's strength lies in their ability to exploit our emotional responses to provoke us into actions that serve their agenda. They understand that if they can influence our judgments, they can direct our behavior. However, the Stoic is unmoved by such tactics, for they have learned to draw a clear distinction between what they can control and what they cannot. The manipulator cannot control your thoughts unless you allow them to, nor can they force you to act against your own principles. By remaining focused on our own responses and judgments, we strip them of their ability to manipulate us. The first step in recognizing what is within our control is to practice self-awareness. We must consistently reflect on our thoughts, emotions, and actions. When faced with a situation that feels manipulative, take a step back. Ask yourself, what part of this situation can I control? What am I reacting to, and why? Is my response coming from a place of wisdom, or is it driven by fear, pride, or the desire for approval? By questioning our reactions, we gain insight into whether we are giving away our control to external influences. It is essential to recognize that our emotional responses are often the key point of vulnerability. When we are manipulated, it is frequently because we are reacting emotionally to something external, someone's words, actions, or expectations. These reactions are often automatic and habitual, rooted in our desires, fears, and past experiences. The Stoic, however, trains themselves to observe these emotions without immediately acting upon them. This practice of detachment allows us to create space between the event and our response, giving us the opportunity to choose a more reasoned, measured reaction. This is not to say that we suppress our emotions or deny our feelings. Rather, it means that we develop the strength to control how we allow our emotions to influence our actions. We learn to recognize that we are not our emotions. They are transient, like the weather, and they do not define us. By stepping back and observing our feelings from a place of detachment, we regain control over them. We no longer allow our emotions to dictate our choices, and thus we protect ourselves from being manipulated by those who seek to exploit these emotional triggers. A key aspect of understanding what is within our control is recognizing our power over our judgments. The Stoic teaches that our judgments, our interpretations of events, are where our true power lies. It is not the events themselves that affect us, but how we interpret them. When someone attempts to manipulate us, they are trying to alter our judgment of a situation, of a person, or of ourselves. If we allow them to change how we see things, we lose our agency. But if we hold firm in our judgment, guided by reason and virtue, we remain free. For example, if someone criticizes you in an attempt to manipulate your actions, the Stoic does not take this criticism personally. Instead, they ask themselves, is this criticism based on truth? Does it align with my values? Is it meant to help me grow, or is it designed to make me feel insecure or inferior? The Stoic understands that external opinions are just that, external. They are reflections of the other person's beliefs, not definitive truths about who we are. By questioning the validity of external judgments, we prevent them from having any power over us. This brings us to another important aspect of recognizing what is within our control, our ability to choose our actions. We cannot control the actions of others, but we can choose how we respond to them. Manipulators often rely on our automatic responses, hoping to provoke us into reactions that serve their agenda. But the Stoic remains calm and deliberate in their actions, responding based on reason and virtue rather than emotion or impulse. When we choose our actions in this way, we refuse to be controlled by others, and we regain our freedom. The Stoic also understands that we can control our thoughts and attitudes toward external events. The events themselves are often beyond our control, but our interpretation of them is always within our power. Consider a challenging situation at work or in your personal life. While you cannot control the actions of others involved, you can choose how to view the situation. You can decide to see it as an opportunity for growth, as a test of your resilience, or as a chance to practice patience and wisdom. By choosing a perspective rooted in virtue, we transform what could be a source of frustration into a source of ration. This understanding extends to our relationships as well. When we recognize that we cannot control others, we stop trying to force people to think or act in a certain way. Instead, we focus on what we can control: how we treat others, how we respond to their actions, and how we maintain our own integrity. When we stop trying to manipulate others and instead focus on cultivating our own character, we free ourselves from the cycles of manipulation and control. We also set an example for others, demonstrating that it is possible to engage with the world without being controlled by it. Ultimately, recognizing what is within our control brings a sense of freedom. We no longer feel the weight of the world on our shoulders, for we know that our true power lies in our ability to respond to it with wisdom, patience, and virtue. The Stoic is not a passive observer of life. They are an active participant, choosing how to engage with the world based on their own principles, not based on the whims of others. By understanding what is truly within our control, we reclaim our agency and protect ourselves from the forces of manipulation that seek to bend us to their will. In this way, we maintain our integrity, our peace, and our freedom, no matter what the world may bring. 4. The importance of self-knowledge. The pursuit of self-knowledge is the cornerstone of Stoic wisdom, for it is only through understanding ourselves that we can master our responses to external influences and avoid manipulation. To know oneself is to possess the key to true freedom. In the realm of manipulation, this self-awareness becomes an invaluable tool. When we know our own weaknesses, desires, and inclinations, we can guard against those who seek to exploit them. Without this knowledge, we become vulnerable to forces that wish to control our thoughts, our emotions, and our actions. The Stoic recognizes that we are not merely passive recipients of the world's influence, we are active participants, and our responses to external events are shaped by our internal states. Our desires, fears, and values guide our thoughts and actions. Therefore, if we do not have a deep understanding of what drives us, we become easily swayed by external forces. Manipulators, conscious or unconscious of their influence, target these internal vulnerabilities, pushing us toward actions that align with their interests, not our own. They appeal to our pride, our insecurities, and our unexamined needs. In contrast, the Stoic who is attuned to their own inner workings is not easily deceived, for they understand the motivations that drive their behavior and can separate those from the external pressures they face. To develop self-knowledge, the Stoic begins with deep reflection. Regular self-reflection is not merely a tool for personal growth, but a practice that shields us from manipulation. By examining our thoughts and emotions regularly, we gain insight into the habitual patterns that guide our behavior. Why do we act the way we do? Why do we react emotionally in certain situations? What needs or desires are we attempting to fulfill through our actions? These questions, though simple, hold profound answers that can illuminate the parts of ourselves we may otherwise ignore or suppress. This process of introspection allows us to identify the things we value most deeply. For a Stoic, these values are not to be derived from the opinions of others or from external sources, but from reason, virtue, and the understanding of nature's law. What do you stand for? What virtues guide your life? Is it wisdom, courage, justice, or temperance? When we are clear on what we hold most dear, we become much less likely to be swayed by forces that attempt to manipulate us away from these values. The manipulator will attempt to lead us astray by appealing to things that are fleeting, superficial, or in conflict with our deepest principles. But the Stoic, with a firm grasp of their values, remains rooted in what is truly important and does not yield to external pressures. The importance of self-knowledge also extends to understanding our weaknesses. Every person has areas where they are more vulnerable, whether it's a fear of rejection, a desire for approval, or a tendency to seek validation. The manipulator knows this, and they will use these vulnerabilities to their advantage. But when we are aware of our own weaknesses, we can fortify ourselves against such attempts. By acknowledging our fears and desires, we take away the power of those who would use them against us. We can anticipate when we are most vulnerable and prepare ourselves to respond with wisdom rather than emotional reactivity. For example, if you know that you have a deep-seated fear of failure, a manipulator may try to exploit this fear to get you to act in a way that benefits them. The Stoic response to such an attempt would be to recognize the fear without allowing it to dictate your actions. You would remind yourself that failure, while painful, is not the worst thing that can happen. It is an opportunity for growth and learning. With this knowledge, the manipulator's attempt to control your actions through fear would be rendered powerless. Self-knowledge also involves understanding our triggers, the situations and or behaviors that provoke strong emotional responses. Often manipulators will use such triggers to elicit emotional reactions that serve their agenda. For instance, they may deliberately say something hurtful or put us in a position where we feel we must defend ourselves. The more aware we are of what triggers us, the more prepared we are to respond calmly and rationally. This is a key part of the Stoic practice of controlling our reactions. By recognizing our triggers ahead of time, we can practice detachment, refusing to let these external provocations control our internal state. The Stoic must also understand the role of desire in their life. Desire, in and of itself, is not inherently bad. It is when our desires control us, when we act out of a need to fulfill them at any cost, that they become a source of vulnerability. The manipulator exploits our desires by presenting us with promises of what we want: status, wealth, pleasure, and suggesting that we must act in a certain way to obtain it. The Stoic, however, does not allow desires to dictate their actions. They recognize that desires are fleeting and often illusory, and they place more value on inner virtues and the cultivation of wisdom than on external possessions or status. When our desires are tempered with wisdom and self-control, we are not easily swayed by the empty promises of manipulation. In addition to understanding our weaknesses, we must also recognize our strengths. The Stoic is not humble to the point of self-denial, but is fully aware of their own capabilities and virtues. This self-awareness builds confidence, but not the kind of arrogance that leads to foolishness. It is the confidence that comes from knowing what is truly valuable and being secure in our ability to serve in accordance with our values. When we are confident in who we are, when we are aligned with our highest virtues, the manipulator's attempts to control us through flattery or intimidation fall flat. We do not need the validation of others because we already have a firm sense of our own worth. A key aspect of self-knowledge is the ability to objectively assess our actions and their consequences. Stoicism encourages us to continually examine our behavior, asking whether we have acted in accordance with virtue and whether our actions have been in line with our action values. This constant self-assessment keeps us grounded and ensures that we do not stray from our path due to the influence of others. By taking responsibility for our actions and regularly reflecting on them, we remain in control of our lives and immune to manipulation. Finally, self-knowledge in the Stoic tradition involves recognizing our mortality and the impermanence of all things. When we grasp the fleeting nature of life, we understand that external approval, wealth, and status are all transitory. This recognition strips these things of their power over us. A manipulator may try to sell us an illusion of security, promising us happiness if we act in a certain way, but the Stoic knows that true contentment comes from living in accordance with virtue, not from the pursuit of fleeting external rewards. When we accept the impermanence of life, we are no longer afraid of losing what is not essential to our happiness, and thus we become less vulnerable to manipulation. In conclusion, the pursuit of self-knowledge is not a passive activity, but an active, ongoing practice that requires introspection, awareness, and self-discipline. By understanding ourselves, our values, our weaknesses, our desires, and our strengths, we gain the power to respond to the world with clarity and resilience. We become immune to the manipulations of others because we no longer seek what they offer. We know that our true power lies in our ability to align ourselves with virtue, not with the fleeting promises of external gain. Through self-knowledge, we fortify our minds, our wills, and our spirits, ensuring that no force, no manipulator can sway us from our path. 5. Embracing the power of virtue. In the Stoic tradition, virtue is not just an abstract concept, it is the very foundation of a well-lived life, and it holds the key to protecting ourselves from manipulation. Virtue is the highest good, the only thing that is truly within our control and the ultimate source of strength. When we embrace virtue, we cultivate the inner qualities that allow us to resist external pressures, rise above distractions, and remain impervious to those who would seek to lead us astray. The manipulator's greatest weapon is their ability to play on our weaknesses, our desires, fears, and lack of self-control. However, the Stoic who practices virtue is rooted in what is true, good, and eternal, and thus cannot be easily manipulated. The Stoic ideal of virtue encompasses 4 cardinal virtues: wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. These virtues provide the framework for Stoic thought and behavior, and they serve as a powerful antidote to manipulation. When we cultivate these virtues, we align ourselves with the highest aspects of human nature, strengthening our character and our ability to face challenges with grace and integrity. The first of the cardinal virtues is wisdom. Wisdom is the ability to see things as they truly are, free from the distortions of desire, fear, or ignorance. When we cultivate wisdom, we gain the clarity of thought needed to discern what is important and what is not, what is within our control and what is beyond our grasp. In the face of manipulation, wisdom allows us to see through the deception, to recognize the hidden motives of others, and to act in accordance with reason rather than emotional impulse. A manipulator's power lies in their ability to cloud our judgment, to make us act out of ignorance or confusion. But the Stoic, guided by wisdom, remains clear-eyed and unaffected by such tricks. The second cardinal virtue is courage. Courage is not merely the ability to face danger or adversity, it is the ability to act in accordance with what is right, even when it is difficult or unpopular. Courage allows the Stoic to stand firm in their convictions, even when faced with external pressure. In the face of manipulation, courage is essential. The manipulator may attempt to coerce us into actions that go against our values or desires, but the Stoic who is courageous will not yield. Instead, they will stand firm, guided by their inner moral compass, and refuse to act in a way that betrays their integrity. Courage enables us to resist the fear and self-doubt that a manipulator might exploit, and to act with conviction in the face of adversity. Justice, the third cardinal virtue, is the commitment to act in accordance with fairness, respect, and truth. Justice is about understanding our role in the broader web of human relationships and acting in a way that reflects our responsibility to others. When we embrace justice, we cultivate a deep sense of moral responsibility and accountability, and we are less likely to be swayed by manipulative tactics that seek to exploit our sense of guilt, shame, or duty. Manipulators often prey on our sense of justice, making us feel that we must act in a way that benefits them, even at the expense of our own values or well-being. However, the Stoic who is guided by justice will not allow others to exploit their sense of fairness. They will always act in a way that aligns with their moral principles, regardless of the pressure they face. The fourth cardinal virtue is temperance. Temperance is the practice of self-control and moderation, and it is essential in protecting us from manipulation. The manipulator often seeks to exploit our desires, whether for pleasure, wealth, power, or status, and to push us into actions that fulfill these desires at the expense of our greater good. However, the Stoic who practices temperance is not swayed by such temptations. They understand that true happiness does not come from the gratification of fleeting desires, but from living in accordance with reason and virtue. Temperance allows us to remain centered, to resist the urge to act impulsively or out of uncontrolled desire, and to avoid being manipulated by those who seek to use our desires against us. When we embrace virtue, we develop a strong internal foundation that cannot be easily shaken. Virtue becomes our shield against manipulation, for it aligns our actions with what is truly good and valuable. The manipulator may attempt to appeal to our fears, desires, or insecurities, but they cannot manipulate us when we are grounded in virtue. The Stoic who practices wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance has cultivated an internal strength that remains unshaken no matter the external pressures they face. Virtue also teaches us the importance of acting with integrity, even when it is difficult. The manipulator often seeks to get us to act in ways that betray our values or our sense of self. They may use flattery, guilt, or fear to manipulate our actions, but the Stoic who embraces virtue will remain true to their principles, regardless of the external pressure. Integrity means that our actions are aligned with our values, that we act in accordance with what we know to be true and right, regardless of the consequences. The Stoic does not compromise their integrity for the sake of convenience, approval, or material gain. Instead, they stand firm in their commitment to virtue, knowing that it is only by living according to their values that they can truly flourish. One of the most powerful aspects of virtue is its ability to cultivate inner peace. The Stoic understands that true peace comes not from external circumstances, but from living in accordance with virtue. When we act virtuously, we align ourselves with the natural order of the universe, and we find peace in the knowledge that we are doing what is right, regardless of the outcome. This inner peace is a powerful shield against manipulation, for the manipulator seeks to disturb our peace and to create anxiety or confusion. But the Stoic, grounded in virtue, remains calm and centered, unaffected by the chaos of the world around them. The power of virtue also lies in its ability to inspire others. The Stoic who embraces virtue does not only protect themselves from manipulation, they also set an example for others to follow. By living according to virtue, we inspire others to do the same. Our actions become a beacon of light in a world that is often clouded by manipulation and deception. The Stoic who embraces virtue does not act for the sake of recognition or praise, they act because it is the right thing to do. This commitment to virtue, regardless of external circumstances, is what sets the Stoic apart and makes them immune to the manipulative tactics of others. In conclusion, embracing the power of virtue is essential in protecting ourselves from manipulation. Virtue provides us with the strength, clarity, and resilience needed to resist the external pressures that seek to lead us astray. By cultivating wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance, we align ourselves with the highest aspects of human nature and fortify our character against the forces that would seek to control us. The manipulator cannot sway the Stoic who is grounded in virtue, for they are guided by an inner compass that is true and unshakable. When we embrace virtue, we not only protect ourselves from manipulation, but we also become a source of strength and inspiration for others, demonstrating that true power lies in living in accordance with what is good, true, and just. 6. Detaching from external outcomes. One of the central tenets of Stoicism is the understanding that we cannot control the outcomes of our actions, only our own responses. This principle is vital in protecting ourselves from manipulation. The manipulator's strength lies in their ability to create attachments in us, attachments to outcomes, to success, to the approval of others. They understand that if they can make us dependent on external validation, possessions, or status, they can easily guide our actions to serve their own interests. In contrast, the Stoic, who practices detachment from external outcomes, remains free, unaffected by external events, and in control of their own path. The Stoic believes that the only true good is virtue, and that the pursuit of anything outside of virtue, whether wealth, fame, or even personal relationships, leads to an unstable and fragile existence. By attaching ourselves to these external things, we open ourselves up to the whims of fortune, which are beyond our control. Success and failure, praise and criticism, wealth and poverty, these are all external events that lie outside our sphere of influence. The Stoic understands that these external events are fleeting and often predictable, and they do not define our worth or our happiness. When we attach ourselves to these things, we make ourselves vulnerable to manipulation, for the manipulator can use our desires for approval, recognition, or success to control our actions. In the context of manipulation, detaching from external outcomes means that we do not let the pursuit of these outcomes guide our decisions. The manipulator will often frame their influence in terms of what we can gain or lose. They may promise us rewards, recognition, or the achievement of personal goals if we comply with their wishes. However, the Stoic who is detached from external outcomes is not swayed by these promises, for they know that true happiness and fulfillment come from living in accordance with virtue, not from external success. The Stoic understands that in the end, the outcome is not as important as the integrity with which we live our lives. This practice of detachment requires a radical shift in perspective. It requires us to understand that we do not control the world around us, nor do we control how others respond to us. We can only control our own actions, thoughts, and emotions. When we stop investing our emotional energy into the outcomes of our actions, we free ourselves from the anxiety and stress that often accompany the desire for success or approval. We stop allowing ourselves to be manipulated by the fear of failure or the desire for recognition. Instead, we focus on the process, the act of living virtuously, of acting in accordance with reason, regardless of the outcome. To detach from external outcomes, the Stoic practices mindfulness and acceptance. Mindfulness helps us remain present in the moment, focusing on the task at hand rather than worrying about future results. The Stoic does not agonize over what may or may not happen. They simply focus on doing what is right, what is in their control, and let go of the rest. Acceptance comes when we recognize that certain things are beyond our control. No matter how much we strive, there are forces beyond our power. Other power, people's choices, the world's conditions, or the randomness of fate. The Stoic embraces this truth, knowing that peace comes not from controlling these forces but from accepting them and focusing on what they can influence. This detachment from outcomes also teaches us to accept failure with grace. The manipulator often uses the fear of failure as a tool to control us, making us believe that failure is the worst possible outcome, that it signifies our inadequacy or worthlessness. But the Stoic understands that failure is a natural part of life, and it is often a stepping stone to growth and wisdom. Failure does not define us, our response to failure does. A Stoic who is detached from external outcomes does not fear failure because they know that it is not the result that matters, but the character with which they face the challenge. Failure does not diminish their worth, nor does it prevent them from continuing to live according to virtue. In this way, detachment from external outcomes fosters resilience. When we are not emotionally invested in outcomes, we can face both success and failure with equanimity. Success does not inflate our egos, and failure does not crush our spirits. We simply continue on our path, focusing on what is within our control, our thoughts, our actions, and our responses. This resilience makes us impervious to the manipulation of others, for we are no longer swayed by the promises of rewards or the threats of punishment. Our happiness and well-being are not contingent on external validation. They are found in the integrity of our actions, the wisdom with which we make decisions, and the strength with which we face challenges. In conclusion, detaching from external outcomes is a vital practice in the Stoic approach to life and an essential tool in avoiding manipulation. By focusing on what is within our control, the integrity of our actions, the cultivation of virtue, and the wisdom with which we approach the world, we free ourselves from the anxiety and fear that the manipulator seeks to exploit. We act with clarity, resilience, and peace, and our happiness becomes independent of external circumstances. In doing so, we protect ourselves from manipulation and live a life that is true, good, and aligned with our highest values.